perks of the Biblioplex come fully realised with the Mystical Archive cards that are included in Strixhaven boosters. But with such a creative solution to adding new flavour and context to some of Magic's most iconic spells, there are a few metaphysical questions that need answering. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic, flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And today we are going to do a little bonus Strixhaven episode, I suppose you call it. Bonus, where we talk about the Mystical Archive cards, because we didn't get to talk about them in any of our other bits and bobs that we've done for the set already. We mentioned them once when we did our lore world building episode. And we spoke about how the Biblioplex, which is the grand library on the campus of the College of Strixhaven, has supposedly every spell in the multiverse within its annals, and how the Mystical Archive cards are the literal representation of those pages with the spells on them, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool, right?
That is very cool. It opens up some big question marks. Like for every cool thing they say, it's like, okay, right now I'm just going to push up my nose glasses and I'm going to analyze the point of that, because it doesn't make any what the joke we just made before we started was that, okay, cool. As far as maybe that's all they think there are, these 28 Mystical Archive spells across the entire multiverse. That's it. That's all the only spells they are. But I mean, the reality of it is that realistically, they're probably had a chronicle of all of history.
Sure.
And we'll look at this in a second, because I think there's some highlights of where they can tell there are some things they definitely know, and you've got to assume they know everything else as well, right?
So we're not going to do too much of the individual flavour nuggets that are found within these Mystical Archive cards. If you want that, go listen to the incredible Vorthos cast. I mean, if you're listening to us and you're not listening to Vorthos cast,
appreciate it, but what are you doing? Yeah.
I kind of feel like I've said those exact words at some point in our past as well, but this is a good time to reiterate it. They, in their Flavor Picks episode, or their Flavor Gems episode, as their episode's called, they went through the Mystical Archive cards and did things like some of the cool little nuggets of information in the flavor text and some of the cool references in the artwork and all that kind of stuff. There may be a little bit of crossover because there's only so many Mystical Archive cards, 20, as Nathan said, or just thereabouts. So I don't want to be accused of plagiarizing another podcast's research, but there's only so much going on. So instead, we're gonna super nerd out and basically talk about all the neckbeardy implications of what's going on with these cards if we were to take the conceit that they're literally pages from the Biblioplex and what that means. As just a little bit of admin, if I make weird sounds from my mouth place, it's because I've just wolfed down a big meal, because we're recording this on the evening of the 15th, as opposed to our usual morning time that we do on weekends. So yeah, I also have a glass of wine in my hand. Nathan, I believe you also have a beverage.
I'm on pooch, pink cooch.
Pink Hooch.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why they didn't call it Pooch. Every time I look at it, I'm like, your marketing team needs to sort their shit out. Come on, guys.
I think it's because it sounds awful. I wouldn't drink a drink called Pooch.
Ooch doesn't sound great. They got Keith Lemons in it, right? Deliberately, it's like an Ooch. And we were like, oh no, because it's always a Ooch. Deliberately not pronouncing the N because it's supposed to be hooch. And anyway, whatever. British. We've been through this with the Orangina thing. Adverts are weird. Anyway, enough of the segue. Pooch, best drink. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah. So yeah, if there are weird burps and slurps and whatever else, I will try and edit them out. But bear with us, dear listener.
I'm going to deliberately do it now, just so you have to go through and edit them out.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about the Mystical Archive cards. So we jumped into it very quickly there. What the Mystical Archive cards are. In every single booster pack for Strixhaven, there will be an extra card. Is it an extra card or is it just included?
I believe it takes the space of whatever that card would have been.
Okay, there is a card in each one of the booster packs that is a Mystical Archive card, and this is a card with what is effectively the showcase border for the set, because they haven't done a showcase for the regular set cards. So they could have maybe picked either Magecraft or maybe the MDFCs to do showcases for, I feel, but they went with this. So this is the showcase art for the set, and it's a bunch of cards from across Magic's history with brand new artwork, brand new flavor text, and it's basically from anywhere and everywhere. They've also, this doesn't really matter for this podcast, but they've also changed the rarity on a few of these. Chaos Warp is mythic rare.
Yeah, I think they deliberately knew the kind of cards that some of them didn't need to be, and some. I think Chaos Warp was a good one to have at that rarity because it's more directly playable, even outside of standard sets. But I also think there's a touch of limited viability, right? I think there's a
Sure.
degree of you don't want some of these effects to be too rife, because they are going to be in packs that you draft. So you're going to have, a normal Strixhaven set, and suddenly, people are Crux of Fating and Chaos Warping things. So there's probably there's a bit of a concession to that, I imagine.
100%. There seems to be a bit of a mixed bag with the flavor of the kind of conceit of these cards. So essentially, as we said before, these Mystical Archive cards are the pages from the books that are found in the Biblioplex. The Biblioplex is Strixhaven's library, and the whole conceit of this is this library, or this section of the library, holds all of the spells in the multiverse and has a record of them. But a lot of these cards have flavor that kind of either directly references where the card was originally from, or it gives it something completely new, or it ties it directly to Strixhaven. So one example of this, and they do mention this on the Porthos cast, is that Approach of the Second Sun, which was originally an Amonkhet card, and because Amonkhet has two suns, is actually a Strixhaven reference to the two suns on Strixhaven, for example. This isn't the same for all of them. Some of them do directly reference events, but there's a bit of a mixed bag going on, which kind of already kicks off the what are the implications of these spells and having access to them. A lot of the flavor texts directly reference Strixhaven as well. I feel, I don't know if you feel this way, I feel like the flavor texts are definitely not part of the page of the book, if you
Good.
like.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was thinking, as I was going through looking at the amount of different colleges that were represented, and I thought Lorehold might have a few more because they're the ones who like the scrolls. Turns out no, there's actually a pretty even spread across them. And I realised that they weren't footnotes that have been written into the page, as we'll get onto in a couple of my examples. These aren't things that I think these are things that the deans, especially because most of the named class or the named students that we have, like the legendary cycle of uncommons and then the dean cycles, they're the names that pop up. There's a couple of other ones that are just ancillary names that kind of just flesh out the world a little bit more, but these feel like comments, passing comments. If they're reading the spell, what is it that they would say to themselves about it,
or notes in the margin for a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them I think might be a direct quote of to give context, but I think a few of them are just the student or the dean kind of remarking on reading the scroll and being oh wow, this person did this at this time. Pff, what an idiot, or something like that,
The art style as well. I will drop the Scryfall gallery down in the description box, like I've been doing recently for a lot of these things when we talk about the art. I mean, if you haven't seen these cards, I mean, of course you have. If you're listening to this podcast, you will have seen these cards and what they're like. I mean, I love the fact that the art style is all to a card, incredibly illustrative. The person has looked at the spell, thought what the spell might look like, or the event that it's depicting might look like, and has written it into the book. That is just home run for me.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, it's not a real word picture, as it were, a representation. This is an illustration, and I think it works. It works so well with a lot of these because it's not an art style we can kind of get away with as much anymore.
No,
because a lot of it's photorealism or digital artworks that kind of do their best to emulate what it would look like in reality. Whereas this is very expressionistic, which for me, I like it a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think there's a single artwork in the Mystical Archive cards that I wouldn't mind having on a playmat, and I know they're doing playmats for a lot of these, and I don't usually say that. There is usually an artwork that I'd kind of turn my nose up maybe a little bit, but all these to a card are absolutely fantastic. But we are going to get into the implications, because there's quite a lot of weird hypotheticals. This is essentially a hypotheticals episode, because none of this is canon, quote unquote.
Well, that's the thing, is it, or is it not? And that's the question mark, right? Of where is the line? I think so. The biggest question is, how much do the students of Strixhaven know about the rest of the multiverse then?
Because I asked this the other week, right, and we weren't sure.
And I'm pretty sure they must know most of the lore that we know as planes, as people that kind of drift between, as the player character. Obviously, we get to have a window into most of them because we follow various protagonists across various journeys. And the more obscure ones we don't know because they're not that interesting. And obviously, we assume they probably do know these stories on Strixhaven as well, but they're maybe not of note. But there's a few of them that are very obviously listed here that kind of give. And my big caveat to this is we know that there was a little mention in the art book about how Kasmina knows of a big dark force that's coming. Now, considering that they know about most of the bad things that have happened in the multiverse going back through history, it's got to be a pretty big bad thing, right? Or at least you'd expect them to panic a little bit more instead of oh, okay, cool, you've got Exodus coming and they've got the whole Auric crashing the party, as it were. It's you've got to know that there's all this other shit going on. How have you not already tried to form an Oath of the Gatewatch to counter these threats if you know about them? Because from what we can tell, They know about the Eldrazi because there's Kozilek, Inquisition of Kozilek on a card. There's Increasing Vengeance, which shows Nahiri getting increasingly pissed, which has got to be a reference to her trapping Emrakul on the plane. I'm also going to pretense all of this by all of these little notes I'm going to have on these cards. None of them have flavor text to give the context, which is really fucking annoying because the ones that I'm like, do they know about it? Like Tezzeret's Gambit, right? They know about the Phyrexians because they've got Urza's Rage, Teferi's Protection. Those are both spells that are in direct context, like the Phyrexian War, right? And there's no way they don't know who Urza is or what the Phyrexians are if they know about Urza's Rage, right? It wasn't like, oh, that dude over there got angry really this one time.
Sure.
Otherwise, it'd be like another version of Obliterate, right? Which hints at Baron's massive fury at his wife and his daughter dying. So the fact they know that, but then there's also Tezzeret's Gambit, right? With Phyrexian mana, specifically Tezzeret's Gambit was when he was going to try and, corral the praetors to his side. Like, so if you know about the Phyrexians on Mirrodin, and there's another representation of Mirrodin that you're going to talk about in a second, that they clearly know that this Tezzeret guy that must have gone and done this big bad thing, right? Like, how are the Phyrexians not like your biggest students, right? We're training you. Like, at this point, the military army makes sense, right? Because it's like, right, students, we're training you to be a force so we can go and kick Phyrexia's ass when they eventually come.
An interesting note about Tezzeret's Gambit as well is that the artwork for Tezzeret's Gambit shows him clearly holding a drop of Phyrexian oil, which I think is a really nice little nod to the idea, the kind of fan theories that are circling around that Tezzeret is behind the resurgence of the praetors recently.
And again, no flavor text.
No flavor text.
No flavor text, really annoying. I mean, and the thing is, like, they know about, obviously, the War of the Spark, not only because Kasmina was directly affiliated to it, but then there's also D-Spark, which is interesting because they take such a big world event like that, and then it just gets down to a curt little joke from Killian. Bolas's whole campaign is reduced to a punchline, which I think's funny, right? Because this is where the context question mark comes up. It's all well and good for them to know these giant, horrible, like, almost like tales, right, of far-flung planes. Like, to be a student there that's not a planeswalker, I imagine it all sounds quite fanciful.
Well, someone, because I was asking these questions on social media as well, and someone tweeted at us saying it's a bit like if, like, we know about the moon, right? So we know the moon is a celestial body that's there, and we know that some people have gone there. But for most people, unless you're super into moon stuff, you don't really care. Like, you know it's there. It's fine, it's there. Some people have gone there. There might be implications to do with the tides. Who fucking knows? But you kind of just leave it be. And it'd be sort of like us discovering, maybe a better analogy is us discovering, I think this actually might be something that this person said, that there is actively another dimension. Like, there's like a mirror dimension, or like another dimension where there's like this reality but different, but we can't necessarily get there. Like, it would change our understanding of like the universe, but would it really affect our day to day?
Maybe not. I mean, again, this is where I'd have expected someone like Tamio, say, to be on this plane. You know how, like, we saw Narset and Ikoria, and everyone's like, well, is she there? And there might have been, they might have been dropping hints to a future story arc or whatever. But this is very similar to, like, this kind of magic that Tamio had, right, with her forbidden scrolls, the kind of scrolls that have such unbelievable power and magics within them that she refuses to open them. And the first time that she does so, Emrakul manipulates it into a giant mana spell to trap herself in the moon. Weird. Moon, I like that. It comes all full circle. But the idea is that if these are literal spells, like, kind of taken from time and put in, like, it makes you think there's got to be some grander, like, knowledge outside of this, right? Because none of the Elder Dragons are planeswalkers. Do they know? Is there, like, an understanding of Kasmina, right? You've been around gallivanting, seeing all of the nonsense that's out there in the multiverse that is directly threatening. There are multiple extra planar threats that have the ability to change and move between planes. At what point do they go, I know it's not really our problem now, but it's definitely going to be a problem later?
Sure. Well, I think the kind of conclusion that we came to in our world building episode is that maybe a lot of the students just don't really care because they don't think of it as like a real threat. They think about it like an academic problem. Like, so the flavor text, this is a card that does have flavor text, is on Blue Sun Zenith, which is getting a reprint. And this one does directly reference Mirrodin. The flavor text is from Zamone, Quandrix Mage student, who's the main Quandrix student for the set. And the flavor text reads, 5 suns. Can you even imagine how complicated the orbital calculations must be? What I wouldn't give to tackle an equation like that. So, I mean, straight off the bat there, I think that kind of just flat answers the question of, yes, the students do know about other places in the multiverse. Unless in some kind of weird reality, they're like, oh, these are like fairy tales, which I don't think is the case. I think they do know that there's other places. But she doesn't seem to have, like, understand the implication of everything that happened on Mirrodin. She just kind of goes, ooh, shiny new world that I get to discover.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's how they're painting a lot of the students in Strixhaven. you know?
Yeah, they're enjoying the intrigue of it rather than the actual. It's like learning history to learn war tactics rather than going, oh man, look at the shit that people did to each other back in the day. It's like, well, maybe you're looking at it for the different reasons, and the research is for different reasons. Also, history is written by the victor, right? So who is it that have written these books? Who's the person who's gone out to this plane, checked, seen there's 5 suns, then come back and written about it? You know, like
that's an interesting question.
That's another question, right?
So here's a question. If all of these are spells from around the multiverse, and many of them do reference like literal events, like say from the story, let alone just kind of events that we can kind of arbitrarily go, oh, well, on that day a big explosion happened in Day of Judgment or something. But things like the Elder Spell or Tezzeret's Gambit or whatever else, which planeswalker is going around collecting these spells to bring them back? It can't all be Kasmina, can it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, this thing's like, who can survive an Inquisition of Kozilek? Who can like it's an Eldrazi spell, right? And it even says like the to dwell within the blind eternities is unthinkable. To encounter those who could could shatter the mind. I'm like, well, if that's the spell, then it shatters your mind. Who's survived that and gone? You know what? That's a real cool discard spell. I'm going to write that down somewhere. Also, who the fuck writes some of these spells down? You know, some of them are so unfathomable. And this is maybe leading into like another like good point about this is comparing card to card. Like you just mentioned Day of Judgment, and it's got a very good flavor text, right? And this is where I can tell that some of these flavor texts aren't written as page notes. They're written as like the quoting the person reading the spell. This must not become common knowledge. The consequences of such a spell are too great. Lock it away in the restricted archive and destroy its record in the catalogue. Director Tyver to Isabel. And we don't know actually anything more about Director Tyver. He's got a couple of other flavor texts, one other flavor text, within this archive. We don't actually know of them within the set. We haven't seen the Director Tyver as a card. But it also, again, shows that there's more people within this college. There's probably loads of other planeswalkers that drift in and out of a couple of these random students who aren't even that strong comparatively to the other students. They're planeswalkers. So we don't know, right? There might be a million other, invisible Fiashino planeswalkers that die within seconds of being on screen. You know?
Oh man, if only.
But the thing is, they say that this is supposed to be like put it away in the restricted section, and yet Time Warp, chronomancers have a rather different definition of living in the moment. Like, fuck, how is one thing okay? How is Day of Judgment perfectly like that's awful, right? Hide it away, but yeah, Time Warp, fine. Yeah, whatever. Manipulate time all you like. Things like Crux of Fate and things like that. It's like, how do you treat this, right? Like, where's
really
the line?
Interesting. Like, I was kind of like, I love us diving into these and kind of treating them like the literal premise. You said this was the premise, and this is how we're going to like view it. But I was kind of ready at the top of this episode to kind of wave it away and go, but obviously this is just a fun way to do fun reprints and a fun frame, and it's fine. They can do whatever the hell they want. But then the fact that like the Day of Judgment flavor text that you've just read is like hard confirming, like, no, these are spells that people know and can use. I'm like,
imagine
you
if
can't
the wrong
throw
student
that conceit
opens
away.
it. You just got a fucking giant crater where Strixhaven used to be. Like, again, I guess, so one of the funny things, right, is that I said that in terms of power scale, right, like, Day of Judgment isn't even that strong compared to, I think Time Warp's a stronger card than Day of Judgment. Right? So
in what world?
What is it like within the game? A game of Magic, right?
Right. Okay. Not like literally. No. If you were to put that spell.
No, but it's in like something like Tendrils of Agony or Grape Shot, both Storm cards. They're infinitely more dangerous in the hands of a random mage than Day of Judgment is, right? I know that Day of Judgment can ruin your plans as a player, and this is now we're mixing metaphysics of how you play the game. But neither of the Storm cards, the only Storm card out of the three of them, so it's Tendrils of Agony, Weather the Storm, and Grape Shot. Only Weather the Storm got flavor text. It's almost like they needed to avoid going, yeah, okay, like what if one student gets like super carried away with a Grape Shot or Tendrils? That's like death. That's instant death to the person opposite them, right? But then I guess, how often are these students casting more than one spell per turn? And then what's the turn? And then so I threw that out of the window. But the Time Warp was my big one. I was like, for me, changing time is way more dangerous than, okay, giant big crater. Cool, fair enough. And I guess if you synonymize Crux of Fate as specifically the energy of those two dragons fighting, and the reality is an average student isn't going to have the magical prowess of Ugin versus Bolus, right? So I can understand to a degree that Day of Judgment might be like opening Pandora's box, right? If once you know the incantation, it's too late, kaboom. So I can see why that's considered to be the worst one. And looking through, I was like, I wonder if there are any other ridiculous spells on here that they haven't mentioned this for. No, Day of Judgment's probably the most destructive. So there is, within even that, like, there's the flavor works for me. But it's funny to think that they're like, oh, go and hide it away somewhere. Like, don't, just burn the page. The implication. Good God, the implication.
Yeah, I do think it is very funny how how like they just have access to some of these, and like just how would some of them manifest, I
Mm.
wonder.
Like natural order, you've got this bunny rabbit, and suddenly there's a crate of behemoth in your courtyard. You know, like that kind of things. It's amusing, right? But it's still things like Mind's Desire. What's the actual logic behind Mind's Desire as a spell? And this is why I'm annoyed that certain cards. Oh, that's another Storm card I forgot about. But that didn't also have flavor text, and this is where I'm a bit annoyed about some of them not having them, because it's a really cool way to meta contextualize them that we don't normally get. Some of them just have, like, say for example, Harmonize just quotes Song of Freyalise, so clearly the person's gone to Dominaria, found the Song of Freyalise, and then written it back out again into a book for Strixhaven, which makes sense, right? You go to the other places, you go to their libraries, you read up on the spells that they've written down from their plane, and you bring them back again. That's perfectly cool research. Some of them, I think, yeah, you're a little bit like, how do you even find out about how is Village Rites actually a spell? You know?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you're right. I didn't think of that. Like you sort of think when you're playing just a game of Magic, when you have Magic cards, you're like, I know the kind of overarching story, especially in 90s Magic, they loved pushing this idea that you were a wizard who had pages of a book and that was your deck, and that's a really nice, fun flavor. But actually, functionally for the game, that's not how it works. You're more like sort of showing moments of time and like capturing the essence of that moment in time and using it. So like Village Rites would work. But you're right, when they've doubled down on this concept of going, no, literally these mystical archive cards are literally the pages in a book. Village, yeah. I mean, I guess it's the rite. It's the writ, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the ritual of it,
I
right?
guess.
Village Rites, yeah. I mean,
But
again,
you
it's
need
one of these
stuff for that.
It's the
You
functionality.
need the knife and you need the
you need
altar.
you need the dude to kill, right? And then maybe you don't
There's some
get the
Witherbloom
same.
students doing some horrible shit, I tell you.
Yeah, well, this is funny, right? Because it does harken specifically. So Village Rites harken specifically to the Blood Age. Like, my colleagues revile the barbarity of the Blood Age, but I believe we have much to learn from the magics of endless war. Guess who said that? Shockingly,
Ambrose.
yeah, shockingly, it's Ambrose, the douche nozzle. Yeah,
Fuck off, Ambrose.
Which is funny though, because if you compare it to, like, so you have an example for Silent Blood, right? And it's got a very opposite way of, like, again, it shows a little hint. It shows a nice little hint tee of this is how the Deans think. But the way that the Dean's thinking, they're like, again, the Blood Age is interesting. I'm glad they keep hinting at it, because that sounds like a really cool time for Strixhaven. I love the idea that, again, this is like the fallout from the two planes colliding, and I'd have loved to have seen a bit more of that history. I'm always the kind of person, like, you could write me a history book of the last 1,000 years of most planes, and I'd go and sift through and be like, that's interesting, you know. But yeah, some of them, again, it's, you got to kind of suspend your disbelief. Whereas I feel this is kind of trying to fix the invocations from Amonkhet, right? And all of those did a very good job of making all of the spells feel like they were from Amonkhet. You know, even things like Vindicate and stuff like that. That's both Bontu and Aketra kind of using a spell together, because it's a black-white spell. It kind of grounded it a little bit more. They've almost grounded the flavor of these more, but the reality of that kind of makes a little less sense when you pull back that little veneer, when you scrape just that look a little bit below the surface. Suddenly the question mark gets really big, and it's a bit obvious.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do like the sort of reskinning on some of the flavor of this, though. To like do another like individual instance of like actual magic lore that they kind of flipped on its head. Again, Vorthos Cast touched on this, and it was a very good spot. Crux of Fate with the quote unquote Jason Felix art on it.
Nice.
No,
that's a good way to put it. I like it. The quote unquote, beautiful.
But Crux of Fate, the original card, was the moment where Bolos defeats Ugin in Tarkir. But this Crux of Fate is the flip around of the not literal event, because it didn't quite literally happen in War of the Spark, but the kind of abstract idea of the event of Ugin finally defeating Bolos with his machinations. So it's a nice little flip around. Another reference as well to the Elder Spell and the War of the Spark event.
Yeah. Yeah, again, though, who was there in that moment beyond your Sova to go, let me get my pen, I'm just going to write this down. This seems like a really cool spell.
Well, I sort of feel like the more recent ones, like, there were enough Planeswalkers on Ravnica at that point, literally.
Yeah, no, to catch the end, right? Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
so you mentioned Sign in Blood. Sign in Blood has, for my money, one of the best bits of flavor text in terms of, like, pinning down, like, one of the colors of magic. Like, if you were to give each color of magic, which is, you know, white, blue, black, red, green for those who aren't initiated. If you were to give one of them like a tagline, this would be my tagline for black. Oh, I love it. It's always my brightest students who make the worst decisions. Shaylee, Silver Caldine. Yep.
Yep.
Black is super bright, super
Mm.
intelligent, super ambitious, but fuck me, does that lead to them making a bunch of bad deals with demons?
And I think that that's a really good one for Silver Quill anyway, like, right? And this is
Yeah.
what I quite like is that even things like Demonic Tutor, you'd expect that to be like, okay, within the context of the game, that's a super powerful ability. On Strixhaven, they're just four-armed dudes from down the way that, yeah, you probably get a half-decent deal out from them, but they're not like, Bells and Lock Lord of the Pit level demons, right? They're like more down, I want to say down to earth, that sounds really weird. It's my down to earth demon buddy. But they kind of they reverse it a little bit. So where some of the spells that I think would be like really obnoxiously powerful aren't, they just serve the function. And again, there's some that I don't know why we didn't get flavor text for. Things like Urza's Rage, I guess maybe it had too much text on them. I get that, but I feel like, especially when you do something like you quote Limdul for Dark Ritual, like you can, if you're going to do that and you're going to give an opportunity for a little bit of context, I feel like you could have taken it for most of them. And I know they did for most of them anyway. It's just when you do it for all the few that don't, I kind of get a bit, I don't know, I get a bit annoyed about. So I'm like, well, now there's inconsistency.
Sure. I mean, it's a weird one. I mean, the whole premise of this fucking episode is that they've given us something really sweet and juicy. Like, here's literally the representation of the cards in Magic, in a Magic world. This is literally what you're getting, and it's super awesome, and you should love it. And we're going, yeah.
Actually,
now, how can we destroy it? Like,
right?
It's the most ungrateful Magic fan piece of shit reaction. There's a flavor text that it's been given to a card that I desperately love, but it's made me completely rethink how I view the card in a like physical like usage of it. And this is the problem with making these spells like usable objects, I guess, and making it like the realities of how they're used a bit more apparent. And it's Chaos Warp. So the flavor text for Chaos Warp reads, be careful when handling old magical trinkets. You never know who they've been. Augusta Lawhold Dean. That's fucking dark, isn't it?
Yeah, that's literally the top of my page of like in-game implications of like,
oh
imagine,
my God.
like you're sitting there and like, or you're like you have like your little blade or whatever, your trusty machete, and obviously it's been chaos warped from Ugin, like the ineffable or whatever, and you're like, yeah, the idea of in world there's a spell that can twist anything, right, any land, you can twist an entire mountain into a bauble. And imagine if that got reversed. Imagine if somehow that magic got reversed. It's like your little bauble just explodes and you've got an island that explodes out of your pocket.
But it's sort of suggesting that there's still something of that person in that object.
I know, right? Which again, that's hilarious. Oh, you say grim. I mean, yes, it is. Like the reality of magic in general is horrible. But I think, yeah, it's amusing. It does put a smile on my face in the same way it does you. Because again, it's that, oh wow, if that's true, then that opens up so many cans of worms, like all the worms. And I guess at that point they've got to understand colours of. I mean, I guess they're on a plane that has two the planes clashing causes enemy colours to kind of fight against each other. So they're probably going to have a much better grasp of the colours of mana compared to say someone like Innistrad, where I don't necessarily know if Ludovic understands he's using blue magic because, I mean, he's doing necromancy. It's usually black magic, right? But the science aspect of it, right? He might not know that, might not understand that electricity is like blue magic. Whereas on this plane, I feel like they can nail down, like, oh, that's going to take a little bit more effort, right? That's more likely to be a 6-mana spell. Like, that's more likely to be a 5-mana spell. Like, the documentation aspect of it, I think, is on point because I think it makes a lot more sense. That they would have an understanding of what the mana cost would be if it takes more red, less red, if it is even red in the first place. So in that regard, I think it works. I think it works quite succinctly. I do think that they do something that I didn't expect them to do, which is just give Extus a little bit of extra flavour as well. Because even in the stories, we've got up to the ambush, the attack, right, the siege onto the school, but we haven't really got a reason why from an Extus point of view. And being a black-white mage, which is very interesting in my because I don't know necessarily where the white side comes from, because the two flavor texts we get from him are they're quite severe. So the first one is on Eliminate, and it takes so little energy to erase a person. It's almost like the universe doesn't care that they existed at all. And then guilt is not absolution, regret is not justice, but it is right that you suffer. Like, holy fuck, this Exorcist guy seems like he's hardcore, but it's almost like there's almost like an absolution to what he's saying, right? Like, I know he says guilt isn't absolution, but it's almost like he's so certain of what he's saying. It's almost like a heavy burden, right? He's not being malicious. It's like, this is just the way of the world. So I want to know what happened.
Well, I think that's where the white comes from. I think that's a very sort of classically evil white thing. If you're going to use the word evil, is that he wants to cause parity between the kind of haves and the have-nots, doesn't he? Because his whole deal is that he doesn't like the school and the kind of the ethos that they put out there, and it's, as a lot of kind of modern realized villains kind of think, it's the idea of like they don't think they're evil, they think they're freedom fighters. It's like, it's a bit reduced. Like, he's, as we said before, Exodus is definitely a bad dude. But I guess
sure.
in his head, he's got conviction, right? And conviction is a very white trait.
I suppose so. I guess we don't necessarily know. I mean, if he is just the next weekend Saturday morning TV dinner at villain, then fine, cool. But I would like to know if there is a bit of nuance behind it. I'd like to see a bit of backstory, because even when it says on duress that magic brought peace to the Varsalians but was soon corrupted, the Mystic Age, a saga of spells. I like the fact that we know that we're in the Mystic Age, and that might not necessarily be, that's obviously better than the Blood Age because it's not loads of fighting and war and everything, but I think it's interesting that Exodus understands that just because you've got to a point of where you think you're all smartsies and everyone's getting on in this nice community aspect, there isn't negativity underlining it. And this is where I think maybe Luca has a degree of a point, is that maybe the environment is this lovely veneer of everything being great and dandy, but there's scrolls of Day of Judgment sat in Biblioplex. What else is hidden there? What else is, because it's that's a massive ownership of knowledge, right? It's going to have whoever's in charge of it. I know it's a legendary book apparently is in charge of it. He does not deserve to be in charge of the entire magics of the multiverse. Like, that's a pretty big responsibility, So if the wrong planeswalker goes there and suddenly finds out all of these accesses of power, like maybe this is where Nicobolas went to get the Elder Spell. Who said he learned it somewhere? He probably learned it at Strixhaven. It's their fault in the first place. The whole War of the Spark arc could have happened.
Well, quite. I mean, I'm just looking at the flavor text of the Brainstorm that's in this set. And we haven't talked much about the art. The art on these cards is incredible.
Oh, man, right.
The flavor text for Brainstorm reads, infinite ideas flow through the multiverse, waiting for an open mind. The Biblioplex, an introduction. So it's from the introduction book to the Biblioplex. And right there, they just go, oh, here's a multiverse. Here's all the spells in it. Have at it. And you're like, ooh, okay. Like,
yeah,
maybe not.
It makes it more interesting how there are already 5 schools, right? Because they're going to know that there's magics of all of the various combinations, right? They're going to know that, like, I guess they don't tie Lightning Helix to Ravnica, right? I mean, in their version of the Lightning Helix that's in here, it again references the Blood Age and the fact that they thought that the mages back then harnessed thunderstorms. Who says we can't do that now? So again, maybe it recontextualizes, and again, magic only works the way it works on Strixhaven. So maybe there isn't the flexibility, right?
Well, yeah, because they have the snarls on Strixhaven, which is where those specific pairs of mana collided. So I think it really does boil just down to the idea that, people might have like sort of psychographic profile tendencies, I guess, but really the actual magic that you have access to is limited somewhat, which it kind of should be on most planes, right?
Yeah, I'm looking. I don't think there's a single spell that's allied coloured mana on here, which is very clever because that makes sense, because none of those spells would actually come to fruition, right, on Strixhaven if they're only working in conjunctions of. And maybe that's a sub point that maybe they deliberately did that there's no spells that like Dimir or.
I kind of think that's just for the draft environment, right?
Oh shit! Yep, good point. Yep. not that these don't ruin draft environments anyway. Who's expecting Teferi's protection in a game of limited?
Spells. This is just from a mechanical point of view. This just has nothing to do with Vorthos stuff. They've put Faithless Losing and Thrill of Possibility in this set.
True. They also put Shock and Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
So I guess there is there is a concession. Like Infuriate, there are some spells I'm like, why is this in here? I'm like, okay, cool. It's maybe slightly above curve of what you'd expect from the set's mechanics. No one was hammering for Infuriate. No one wants +3/+2 red spell. They're gonna be annoyed when they get that instead of Demonic Consultation or something. When
sure.
Not Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact. Sorry. So I guess there is that trade off of they're going to have some duds as well as some good ones, and everything in limited is somewhat playable in the right context. So. Yeah, I do. Again, the artworks, and we haven't mentioned this at all, but Japanese players are lucky because Japanese packs have a whole slew of artwork that are Japanese specific, kind of like what they did with Ikoria, and exactly what they did with War of the Spark Planeswalkers, of where it's regional exclusives. I have specifically purchased some Japanese packs because I want some of these artworks. They're really cool. But
you didn't tell me that.
Oh, have I not? Yeah, no. Because I didn't want to. Right, so basically, apparently it's only like 50% of the packs that have the Japanese one over the normal one in Japanese. So they'll have the artwork that we get from our packs, but obviously with Japanese text. And I didn't want to say it in case I don't get any of them. Like, so there's a 50% chance. I've only got so many packs. If I don't get any of them, I'm going to be a bit heartbroken. So I didn't want to build it up at all. But I
also put Growth Spiral in this set along with that 4 mana
Eureka.
goes for.
Yeah. Again, I think they might have chosen cards that specifically work within the format as well, right? Because there's a slight sacrifice theme with black, so it makes sense as why they have village rights in there. I imagine they would have been careful that there wasn't any spell that completely broke everything. Like Time Warp, as much as it's strong, it is still 5 mana, right? As much as Day of Judgment is 4 mana Wrath, like it's still a 4 mana Wrath. It's not that much better than say some of the other spells that are in the set. Again, I think it helps that Strixhaven as a set has got some really splashy abilities, so they don't feel out of place anyway. But I do feel like some of them, they like the Dethroner's Grimoire is a really, really cool text that's said in Putrefy of where from Monarch to Mulch as quick as could be. Like these ideas of where these are actual books that they've gone and taken, like Rowan says in Claim the Firstborn about it being a book that was found in Eldraine. And
Sure.
so as you said, okay, are there fairy tales? I reckon some of them will have been, fairy tales. As we've seen with Tamio, it depends on what kind of story you're telling and the power you give the story as to the magic that comes out of it. So again, maybe we're taking it too literally that you sit there and you read the spell out and it does a thing. Maybe there's a whole process that you have to go through, to be able to do it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like I get that. I think that's kind of fair. Like you need a what's it in Dungeons and Dragons? You need a focus.
Yes, yeah. You need, or you need the right ingredients, or you can't just click and make it happen, right? So, it does make sense again within context. And now looking through, thinking about how they wanted to make it for the limited environment, there's not a single card that kind of jumps out at me being completely outrageous. They've done a good job.
I like God's Willing as a card. God's Willing is a card I wish I played more of. Target creature you control gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. Scry 1 for 1 white. Yes, please.
Yeah, they're very good. And again, context for that, they've specifically avoided talking about any specific god, which makes me feel like maybe this is set for because it's very hard to imagine the Theros Pantheon or the Kaldheim Pantheon if you're not from those planes, right?
Right. So this is interesting. This is an interesting sort of little design nugget, which I think is something they've definitely tried to do, is that they've definitely referenced individual circumstances of an event on things that can't be anything else, like Tezzeret's Gambit, Teferi's Protection, especially if they've got the name and the thing, but also like Crux of Fate in the Elder Spell. The Elder Spell wasn't used at any other time other than the War of the Spark event, right? But, as you say, with things like God's Willing and Day of Judgment and Approach of the Second Sun, other planes have gods, other planes have suns, other planes have whatever the other one I said. I completely forgot as I was talking. Do you know what I mean? So I think it is the spell itself to give something protection from a color and to scry, however that manifests in the metaphysical realm of Magic the Gathering. It's not dependent on the fact that they're the Theros gods. It could be any gods. So I think that is kind of a nice design idea. And also, it opens things up. Like I said, I think I said quite a long time ago on this podcast that I wanted another flavor for Chaos Warp. Because I didn't mind the artwork that we had on it, but it's a very busy artwork, the one where it's the person going into the rhinoceros, and I just kind of felt like it was one of those staple cards that needed something else, and so the fact that they've got this dragon turning into an axe or something.
Yeah, I used to find it annoying. It was always showing a creature into a creature, whereas Chaos Warp's that's one of the least aspects of its utility. The fact you can use it on anything from a Gaia's Cradle to an Omniscience, that's what makes it a cool card. So I like the fact they reference kind of like it could have been anything before. It's not just turn your creature into a creature kind of thing. And I guess also I don't think these spells are necessarily saying that you can just straight cast them. I think some of them are just explanations of a spell. I think certain circumstances might, I think the average spell that's on here might not just be, easy to cast as it is anyway. Again, it might just be a documentation. We're taking it too literally that, they can open up the book and cast any of these off as, willy-nilly.
They put a flavor text like the one they did on Day of Judgment into this set. They better have other shit to back it up.
Right, exactly. And again, like Doomblade has a quote from Obnixilis. Like, is that... Did Obnixilis attend Strixhaven? At one point, or did they? And also, Obnixilis lived like millennia ago when this happened. Like, who got the quote? Sorry, Ob, can I just get a quote for our daily newsletter?
Sure,
cheers, fam. Like that kind of thing.
Again, I sort of think like some of these flavor texts are meant to just be kind of fun. This is the problem, isn't it? Like, this is the problem when you're designing a Magic set, and I feel for people like who have designed Magic sets before. We've talked to people like Anthony Tessitore who wrote flavor text and names like for a long time in Magic. It's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back process, because you try and be free and loose with it, and people go, no, tell me how the game works. And then they say, oh, this is how the game works. And people go, no, well, you didn't do it this way then. It's just, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because there are
Yeah.
people like us around who will
Yeah.
pick
If you don't put Limdal on there, I'm gonna be annoyed that you missed the opportunity. When you do, I go, sorry, who is it that was speaking to Limdal?
How do I know who Limdal is?
Do you understand the context of how old he would have been when you got this? Yeah, like obviously you can't win. And I think it's just this is the thing that's more interesting, right? This is why we like doing the more nebulous flavor ideas, because this is almost the perfect box ticking of they've given us a few rules and guidelines, so then how can we play and flex at that without sounding too complaining, because we're not bitching because we're upset, we're bitching because it's interesting to kind of pull it up a little bit and go, okay, cool, if you want to go this far, then maybe go a bit further. There's some people like Ralzeric, like, I mean, imagine, again, I'd like to have a little list of like all the various different planeswalkers have just touched in and out of the plane, at some point, because this feels a little bit like Ravnica. It's a kind of plane that would have been frequented more often. I would have maybe liked, I know they only have, again, one set to do the whole entire plane, or maybe the specific location on the plane, and we probably won't come back here for a few years. They've got to do the whole thing like justice, right? Arcavios has got to be well represented, whereas I don't think Arcavios was represented at all within this set. I think it was specifically Strixhaven, which is the whole point, right? But then when we want to take a little step out and know that we probably aren't going to come back here for a few years, where's the other bits that we could have like maybe known or a little nod or something to? I wouldn't have minded like a book in the background where it kind of shows like the best students across like the last 10 years. What am I trying to look for? What alumni, right? Like the best of the alumni.
Yeah, like a yearbook for alumni.
And you could have, and you could have nicely seen like a couple of planeswalkers. You're like, oh, okay, they've been here or they've been here. And I think there's a lot of planeswalkers that could have, like say Tamio or Narset. These are the kind of planeswalkers that very easily could have tapped in, given there a little bit of like information to help, right? For me, I was like,
visiting
Tamio,
lecturer or something.
Yeah, like I imagine that Tamio wouldn't want to share too much because she's a bit, precious about her scrolls. But there might be some information and knowledge that she's more willing to share, And I feel like that is maybe something that could have shown a little bit in these, as much as I think they did a great job. Some of them just have a nice, the flavor of it is lovely and the artwork of it is lovely, but it's a little bit too wash, right? It didn't feel like, it felt like they maybe could have gone just a little bit deeper. And again, we're asking we didn't need it, and I'm not saying it's missing. I'm just saying it's a potential thing that they could have done in an environment like this, of where you're acknowledging.
But then, at what point are you just creating a whole new set?
Yes, at what point do you stop as well? Like, how far do you go? I think it's just interesting where you do a set and you absolutely go, this place absolutely knows about everywhere else, to the point of where we're quoting other planeswalkers, we're quoting people from history within the lore of the world, not just, oh, it's an invocation, nudge, nudge. It's like, no, this is a spell in a book that they've gone and researched. I'm like, cool. Then maybe you could have lent into it in other ways a little bit more, or shown. I mean, again, I'm just asking for the world, and not wanting to pay anything for it. So I mean, fuck me, I guess.
There is a Ralzeric flavor text on these.
There is, on Shock, but
Shock,
don't. Yeah, this is the thing. Is this Ral leaving research notes in Strixhaven, or is that someone who's gone to because Mizzix is on here as well, right? Mm-hmm. There's a Mizzix mastery and it quotes Mizzix, so it doesn't quote Mizzix.
Maybe there's a planeswalker going around who, like how we want our chef planeswalker,
the researcher.
Maybe there's a journalist.
Yeah, see, that would be really cool. That again. Sorry, can I just take a quote, please? Like that in my mind, like as much as that sounds absurd, I'm like, that's perfect.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, so Nicole, how do you feel having taken this great defeat? It's like, I mean,
to win games you got to score more points.
So it's like, I've been winning for 14,000 years. Got to take an L every now and again.
They just want a bit more on the day.
Exactly. It's like you try having an invisible brother that fucking scuppers your plans after 12,000 years of planning it. Who could have known? They got it in the last minute. What can I say?
What's your favourite, like, if you had to pick a couple, reskin of some of these cards, like with new flavour, or like maybe more generic flavour that you thought was probably needed for the spell?
I mean, I really liked the Doomblade aspect. I know that again we're quoting Vortex class, because it does, the flavor text does basically just list dies to Doomblade. I really like that succinct idea of where they take again the joke of the players and they put it into the flavor of the card. I thought that was really, really clever. I thought oh man, it's really hard to pick like ones that's better than the rest of them. I guess I like things like Natural Order, right? Of where it's a spell that we haven't seen in a long time that does a really cool splashy effect, but it makes sense within the context of the plane. So Dean is saying that nature is neither cruel nor kind. It operates on necessity, not sentiment. It kind of reinforces the card's flavour quite nicely. And twice, and again, it's within the set itself. Witherbloom like sacrificing things. They've got some big bullshit creatures, so it works as actually. The more I talk about how like well the cards work play wise and flavour wise, I mean, I can tell they've done a very, very good job to tie all of these cards together into a playable environment. So I think that's a really, really clever one. And again, like I really liked the reflavoring of the Exodus ones, because again, it gives flavor, again, context for the set, and taking cards that are otherwise unrelated, and plonking it within the plane. So I
Sure.
quite like those.
I think for me, Putrefy is a really strong contender because Putrefy's had 3 other printings, as far as I remember, and I think they're all to do with the Golgari, which obviously is as they would be because it's a Ravnica card and black-green spell about things rotting. Of course, it's going to be Golgari, but they all had also quite a similar aesthetic, which was just rotting things rotting away. Whereas the Putrefy on here, and the artist is Mintu Hinian, is a lot cleaner. Like, it still shows a skeleton and it still shows someone rotting away. But it's a queen rotting away a king, and the implication with the flavor text from Monarch to Mulch as quick as could be. The dethrone is Grimoire, which is Grimoire, as you mentioned earlier. It's like a succession thing. So I mean, this could easily be Marchesa, like a representation of Marchesa taking the throne away from Brago, like in a sort of roundabout way. But yeah, I like this.
That
kind
gave
of
me
idea.
super Disney vibes, like of the evil queen. You know how it's always the stepmother ends up having the king, like
it's
knocked
very
off.
medieval dress as well.
Yeah,
like,
it feels very. If that feels really Eldraine, right? I'm surprised they didn't give that Eldraine concept.
Could be Eldraine. It could be an ancient history of Eldraine. Never know.
I think the other one I liked was Counterspell because it takes away that whole no aspect, right? It's still got a big palm in the center of the artwork, which is bright orange, which I love because it's a complete juxtaposition to like blue spells. But the talking about one needs not know the specific details of a spell to suppress its effect, simply rearrange the rules of the reality within which the spell operates. And basically what it's saying is instead of bursting the spell, is that it creates an environment where the spell can't work. And it makes it feel a little bit more intellectual than just going, nah. You know, so you've got like didn't say please and saw it coming, like that kind of that douchey snidey aspect, which again works within the context of students one-upping each other. But I like the idea that Ibrahim Quandrix Dean kind of understands that it's not about saying no, it's about undermining your opponent, not about slapping them back in the face, which again is very different to the way that Silver Quill would have done. I'd have loved to have seen a black or a white counterspell. Like, I know that they've got Mana Tithe. I would have liked to have seen Mana Tithe tie more directly to Silver Quill's like white writing aspect of like being able to kind of be able to have a comeback to someone else's statement, and then that kind of fucks it up a little bit and makes it collapse. I kind of like to have seen that. Again, it was another one that did like the Successors Grimoire, which or the Dethroners Grimoire, which again ties the two cards together. Cool, fair enough. But that's maybe one that they could have then brought back to the writing aspect of the Silver Quill. Again, like I'm saying, these are misses. It's not even slightly close to a miss because you're giving us more than I wanted. But
sure, I think another one for me as well, which is Ephemerate, which on this artwork shows an angel. It seems to be an angel being kind of blipped in and out again because it's a flicker spell, right? Whereas the Bastion Eldahame artwork for the original Ephemerate, which is a great, fantastically realized artwork, which shows a lion kind of phasing in and out of reality. But it's such a bold choice, like the original Ephemerate. Like, it can't, like, it's a lion. It's a literal lion. And to have that in any deck which doesn't necessarily have like a cat theme is very bold. So I'm kind of glad they went for maybe a slightly more generic, but yeah, like a kind of a more applicable artwork.
Also, I know what cats are like. I don't care how big you are. How is it not losing its mind at blipping in and out of existence? Like, I know cats that the slightest sound, the slightest movement, they skitter crap themselves all over the room. Like
maybe wherever that line's from, that's what cats do.
But they just slip in and out of reality.
Yeah, I mean,
it makes hunting a lot easier, right?
None of these
it's not Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I get you. Yeah, I know what you mean. It does. Yeah, there's this. Again, some of these spells feel really, especially when you're playing something like Commander, because these are quite a lot of staple effects. They feel super premium, right? And they should still feel super premium, especially if you're going to get your hands on one of like the Japanese ones, which you need to know what the spells are, by the way, if you get the Japanese ones, because it's very difficult to tell what they are.
Well, yeah, unless you can read Japanese.
Well, yes, that too. But sometimes it's in like the artwork isn't necessarily super intuitive. Right?
Well, some of them are straight up flipped around.
Yeah, which is again another the catastrophe, the continuation of clusterfucks that was that was this set. But I feel like some of these do a really good job of having that impact of. This is what I liked about Secret Layers is some of the ones like the Party Hard Shred Harder. Like Anguish Unmaking's a really good spell. Like, it's a very decent removal spell, and then you get a really cool effect of it. Like, who doesn't want to win a game with Tendrils of Agony and use like the cool artwork version of it, right? Or approach the seconds on any of them. Like, it's good that they've chosen the cards that I feel like have the biggest effect. There's a couple of them like Faithless Looting that are just your run of the mill cards, but they had to do like a selection across the across the board, right? They couldn't just make everyone an absolute home run, ridiculous powerhouse. And there's a couple of cards I didn't even know about in here, like Adventurous Impulse, for example. I didn't know was an actual card. And it's got, I think, one of the better artworks out of all of them. For me personally, obviously, it's all subjective. But I really like the artwork on that, and it's quite nice to have a card that I'd never have thought of playing that I might now play specifically because of the artwork. And she's like, yeah, I mean, maybe there's better effects if they're out there, but at least this one looks really, really pretty. But yeah, no, I think again, like it's a little extra flavor. It gives the world a little bit more space to breathe when you only have one set to do it. It gives Deans that don't even get flavor text on their card because they put so many rules on them to make them nuanced. It gives them a voice and some flavor to them as well. You know,
Nasari, my red Dean from Prismari gets a little flavor text as well.
Yeah, and otherwise you wouldn't have got a quote, right? You wouldn't have unless you go through all the stories and you find that one little thing they said in passing conversation to Liliana. Cool, great. Those are the only words I know of this person. Again, yeah, it gives a little bit of more context. Even if the context is something that we can, again, metaphysically play around with, that's probably the most engaging thing about it, right? Because this isn't a real place. This isn't a real thing. This isn't a representation they can get wrong necessarily. It's all up to interpretation. And the more they give us to talk about and pull apart, the better, I think.
Yeah.
And the art diversity is another thing, yeah. The fact that they're able to give artworks we don't normally get to see, like they did with the Courier, it can feel a bit much, but if it's only peppered over the top, all it is seasoning. And there's no such thing as over seasoning. I mean, there is. I've had some really salty chips before. But, whatever. Point stands.
Cool. All right. Well, that'll do it. I think, this wasn't going to be a long one. And yeah, guys, let us know if you enjoyed this slightly looser episode. I know it was a bit more rambly, a bit
back
more
to waffles.
nebulous. Yeah,
that's
a little bit more
again.
waffles. We do maybe 3 big ones and a waffly one, and that's kind of our ratio. And then if you don't like the waffly ones, then you can wait until we do the dense breakdowns of the story and whatnot.
Yeah, there's plenty of bacon to go with those waffles, so don't worry.
We're 68 episodes in. I still haven't decided whether I really like this analogy that you bust out. I'm sorry to do this to you.
This is such... Wow, you've been sitting on this for a while. Cause
I've had a glass of wine.
You're getting a bit bullshit. No, I like it. Good.
It's where does it end?
No, I'm not sure. I don't even think it was a good analogy to begin with. I just had to run with it. And
don't get me wrong. I'm not stopping you from doing it.
Good.
I'm just letting you know that every time you do it, I'm going to be in the background, with a little notepad with a pen tapping, just kind of going, okay, he went there with it this time. We'll see where he goes with it.
I mean, I'm just quoting you on all of this, and all of this is me, right? This is all just you, okay? Fine. Good. Disassociate as soon as you can. I like it.
Oh, man.
Reasons.
Well, guys, again, if you like the waffly episodes, and if you love or dislike Nathan's analogies, you can let us know on Twitter at mtflavouring. We've been having a great time on social media recently. The podcast has been growing from strength to strength in recent weeks. And if you want to get on the fun, we reply to a lot of stuff. We reply to pretty much everything, even when we shouldn't do, on social media, on our Twitter account. And you can also hit us up on emails, mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is?
At The Fox in the Moon.
I don't think there's much more to say. I like the Mystical Archive cards. I think it'll be something really cool to bring back in the future. I think that, you're right. This is the fixed invocations. I fixed a lot of it. I mean, in hindsight, the invocations are actually okay. I think that people are starting to realise that now. But more of this, please, in future sets where appropriate, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic.
Cool. All right, guys. All that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.